Chapter 1, Section B. What's in a name? For those unfamiliar with the term, etymology is the study of the history of words, their origins, and how their form and meaning have changed over time. By an extension, the term, the etymology of, a word, means the origin of the particular word. For example, the word, etymology, is derived from the Greek word, etymologia, itself from etymon, meaning true sense, and the suffix, logia, denoting the study of. Etymon is also used in English to refer to the source word of a given word. Johann Bayer, 1572 to March 7, 1625, was a German lawyer and uranographer, celestial cartographer. He was born in Rhein, Lower Bavaria, in 1572. At 20, in 1592, he began his study of philosophy and law, at the University of Ingolstadt, after which he moved to Augsburg to begin work as a lawyer, becoming legal advisor to the city council in 1612. Bayer had several interests outside his work, including archaeology and mathematics. However, he is primarily known for his work in astronomy, particularly for his work on determining the positions of objects on the celestial sphere. A Bayer designation is a stellar designation in which a specific star is identified by a Greek letter, followed by the genitive form of its parent constellation's Latin name. The original list of Bayer designations contained 1,564 stars. Most of the brighter stars were assigned their first systematic names by Johann Bayer in 1603, in his star atlas, Uranometria. Bayer assigned a lowercase Greek letter, such as alpha, beta, gamma, etc., to each star he catalogued, combined with the Latin name of the star's parent constellation in genitive, possessive, form. For example, Aldebaran is designated A. Tauri, pronounced Alpha Tauri and abbreviated A. Tau, which means Alpha of the constellation Taurus, even though the star merely happens to lie along the same line of sight as the Hyades in Taurus. For the most part, Bayer assigned Greek and Latin letters to stars in rough order of apparent brightness, from brightest to dimmest, within a particular constellation. Since in a majority of constellations the brightest star is designated Alpha, many people wrongly assume that Bayer meant to put the stars exclusively in order of their brightness, but in his day there was no way to measure stellar brightness precisely. Traditionally, the stars were assigned to one of 6 magnitude classes, and Bayer's catalog lists all the first magnitude stars, followed by all the second magnitude stars, and so on. Within each magnitude class, Bayer made no attempt to arrange stars by relative brightness. Bayer did not always follow this rule. He sometimes assigned letters to stars according to their location within a constellation, for example, the northern, southern, eastern, or western part of a constellation, according to either the order in which they rise in the east, to his own arbitrary choosing, or to historical or mythological information on specific stars within a constellation. The proper astronomical designation for Aldebaran is Alpha Tauri, abbreviated A. Tau, and it happens to be the brightest star in its constellation. However, an interesting bit of coincidence can be obtained from the abbreviated form of the designation, that is entirely suggestive of retaining its antiquated Hebrew name, Aleph, and carrying it into the modern day. This would indicate a significance, not only to the constellation, but to the particular star itself. Both the Greek letter Alpha, and the Hebrew letter Aleph, are believed to have derived from the Phoenician letter Aleph, which looks much like the Latin letter A, turned on its side with its vertex facing to the left. The name Aleph is derived from the West Semitic word for ox, and the shape of the letter derives from a Proto-Sinaitic glyph, based on a hieroglyph which depicts an ox, bull, or cow's head. When viewed side by side, and with the Phoenician Aleph rotated so that its vertex faces downward, similar to a Latin letter, A, turned upside down, the commonalities become blatantly obvious. The ox, bull, or cow's head, is visually reminiscent of the Hyades star cluster, where Aldebaran is currently located. The positions of the stars in this asterism have changed very little in the last 10,000 years, and to the early Hebrews, Taurus was the first constellation in their zodiac. Consequently, it was represented by the first letter in their alphabet, Aleph. As this constellation marked the vernal equinox, it was also the first constellation in the Babylonian zodiac, and the Babylonians themselves described it as the bull in front. The Akkadian name for the constellation Taurus was Alu, which is etymologically reminiscent of Aleph, and is highly indicative of a common etymological derivative.
Aleph means an aluf, a champion, something elevated.
For example, the term aloof is taken from the Bible, the Torah, confer, Toru, Torah, where it was a rank of nobility among the Edomites. It comes from a Semitic root meaning thousand, making an aloof, the one who commands 1,000 people. The Hebrew word translated as clan is also aloof, used to describe Edom and Moab, also later translated as chief, general, or duke. The Moabite language is an extinct Canaanite language, spoken in Moab, modern-day central western Jordan, in the early 1st millennium BCE. It was written using a variant of the Phoenician alphabet. Coincidentally, Al-Lulim was the first king of Eridu, as well as Sumer, according to the mythological antediluvian section of the Sumerian king list. The element, lim, could be related to several Semitic words. In Ugaritic, lim is cognate with Hebrew, leom, and both mean people or nation. In Akkadian, lim or limu means thousand, which may be related to Hebrew, leom, people, and is used as a shortened form of thousand gods that appear in Syro-Hittite treaties and Ugaritic texts. Elohim is a grammatically singular or plural noun for God, or gods, in both modern and ancient Hebrew language, and is etymologically reminiscent of Al-Lulim. Al-Laim is sometimes seen as an alternative transliteration of Elohim. The Sumerian king list has the following entry for Al-Lulim: after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, Al-Lulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Enki, the god of Eridu, is said to have brought civilization to Sumer at this point, or just shortly before. In Sumerian mythology, Eridu was originally the home of Enki, later known by the Akkadians as Yah, who was considered to have founded the city. Whether Eridu at one time also played an important political role in Sumerian affairs is viewed by mainstream academics as not certain, though not improbable. Enki, an Anunnaki god, was the son of Anu, the great bull of heaven. Could it be even remotely possible that the constellation Alu, Taurus, was named, by the post-Diluvian Akkadians, from 2300 BCE, after the antediluvian, pre-flood, king, Al-Lulim? The Mesopotamian gods bore many similarities with humans and were anthropomorphic, thereby having humanoid form. They were thought to be more powerful, all-seeing and all-knowing, unfathomable, and above all, immortal. One of their prominent features was a terrifying brightness, Melamu, which surrounded them, producing an immediate reaction of awe and reverence among men. It was believed that man originated as a divine act of creation, and the gods were believed to be the source of life, and held power over sickness and health, as well as the destinies of men. In the Sumerian language, the gods were referred to as Dingir, while in the Akkadian language they were known as Elu, and it appears as though there was syncretism between the gods worshipped by the two groups, adopting one another's deities. These traditions have carried over into modern times.
What's interesting about an Aleph? Well, let's take a look at an Aleph for a moment. An Aleph happens to be numerically what? What is Aleph numerically? 1. Good. If I take a look at an Aleph, I notice that it's actually made of 3 letters, 2 letters. I have a Yud, 2 Yuds, and a Vav. Help me along. What's the numerical value of Yud? Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. So I have Yud, Yud, numerical value of a Vav. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, 6. That's interesting because that happens to be the same numerical value as this word. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. God's name. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Hey is 5. You add it together, what do you get? 26. So we see in the structure of the Aleph the same numerical value as God's name. And that's very interesting. Why? Because Aleph, of course, is one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So it makes sense that whenever you see in Aleph, it always has to do with something connecting with the supernal, with the divine, with Hashem. But let's see if it's consistent with all our rules. What is the first time in Aleph begins a root of a word in the Torah? Go with me. Bereshit, bara, Elokim. What does Elokim mean? Means God, Hashem. So we see the consistency. First time begins a word of the Torah. It's an Aleph, is Elokim. So the Aleph will always be something connected with God. Question, how do you pronounce an Aleph? Pronounce an Aleph for me. Give me the pronunciation of an Aleph. Well, let's see, a Beit is a B, a Gimel is a G, a Dalet is a D. Pronounce an Aleph? That's only if you have a Patek or Chametz under it. Listen to how I pronounce an Aleph. Did you hear it? There's no sound. It's connected with something above this world.
El, written Aleph, Lamed, in Hebrew, Al or El in English, is a Northwest Semitic word meaning deity, and the bull was symbolic to him. El is referred to again and again as Toru, El, Bull El, or the bull god. For the Canaanites, El do Yahweh Sabaoth, confer, Yahweh Sabaoth, or El, was the supreme god, the father of mankind and all creatures. Cognate forms of the name are found throughout the Semitic languages. They include Ugaritic, El, plural, Elhim, Phoenician, El, plural, Elm, Hebrew, El, plural, Elohim, Aramaic, El, Akkadian, Elu, plural, Elanu, confer, Anu, and Alu. In Ugaritic the plural form meaning gods is Elhim, equivalent to Hebrew Elohim, gods. The stem, El, is found prominently in the earliest strata of East Semitic, Northwest Semitic, and South Semitic groups. Personal names including the stem, El, are found with similar patterns both in Amorite and South Arabic, which indicates that probably already in Proto-Semitic, El, was both a generic term for God, and the common name or title of a single particular god, or god. El, is usually derived from a root, meaning to be strong, and or, to be in front. The listener will recall that the Babylonians described the constellation Taurus as, the bull in front, and, known as, On, in ancient Sumer, Anu, the patron of kings, dates back to at least 3000 BCE in the archaeological record, making him one of the oldest of the gods. Like his Canaanite counterpart El, he was once known as the Great Bull. In Mesopotamian mythology, Gugalana, literally, the Great Bull of Heaven, in Sumerian, Gu, is bull, Gal, is great, On, is heaven, and Na, is of, was a Sumerian deity, husband of Erish-ki-gal, as well as the constellation known today as Taurus, whereas Guana simply means, bull of heaven, Taurus, or at least its head, the Hyades, confer, Aleph. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Alu, is the celestial bull. Stephen Herbert Langdon, an American-born British Assyriologist with an impressive accreditation, cites a translation of a cuneiform script by Major General Sir H.C. Rawlinson, and states that, Alu is androgynous, which corresponds, virtually identically, to a female principle of the creator god Anu, On, whose early iconography suggests a celestial sky goddess, in the form of a cow, whose udders produce rain, confer, Hyades, and who becomes Antu, in the Akkadian pantheon. In Sumerian, the designation, On, was used interchangeably with, the heavens, so that in some cases it is doubtful whether under the term, the god, On, or the heavens, is being denoted, quite possibly due to the fact that, to a degree, they are part of the same spatial expanse, i.e., bull of heaven, equals, constellation Taurus. Several pieces of evidence have led scholars to the conclusion that El was the original god of Israel. For example, the word Israel is based on the name of El, rather than on that of Yahweh. Prior to becoming Yahweh, the national god of Israel, and taking on monotheistic attributes in the 6th century BCE, he was a part of the Canaanite pantheon in the period before the Babylonian captivity. Archaeological evidence reveals that during this time period the Israelites were a group of Canaanite people. Yahweh was seen as a war god, and equated with El, hence, El, Ohim. According to German theologian and Old Testament scholar, Gerhard Johannes Botterweck, and Swedish theologian, Carl Wilhelm Helmer Ringgren, the earliest known occurrence of the name Yahu, is its inclusion of the name, the land of Shasu, Yiwa, Confer, Eldu, Yahweh, Sabaoth, in a list of Egyptian place names found in the Temple of Amun, at Soleb, from the time of Amenhotep III, 1402 to 1363 BCE. The place name appears to be associated with Asiatic nomads in the 14th to 13th centuries BCE. A later mention, from the era of Ramses II, circa 1303 BCE to 1213 BCE, associates Yahu with Mount Seir. From this, it is generally supposed that this Yahu refers to a place in the area of Moab and Edom. Whether the god was named after the place, or the place named after the god, is undecided. Early worship of Yahweh likely originated in southern Canaan during the Late Bronze Age. It is probable that Yahu, or Yahweh, was worshipped in southern Canaan, Edom, Moab, and Midian, from the 14th century BCE, and that this cult was transmitted northwards due to the Kenites. The oldest West Semitic attestation of the name is the inscription of the victory stela erected by Meshat, king of Moab, in the 9th century BCE. In this inscription, however, Yahweh is not presented as a Moabite deity. Regarding the Shasu of Yiwa, Michael Chernichow, Astur, professor of Yiddish and Russian literature at Brandeis University, and a professor of history, ancient classical culture and the Middle East, at Southern Illinois University Edwardsville, has observed that the hieroglyphic rendering corresponds very precisely to the Hebrew tetragrammaton, Yod-He-Vav-He, or Yahweh, and antedates the hitherto oldest occurrence of that divine name, on the Moabite stone, by over 500 years. Donald B. Redford, professor of classics and ancient Mediterranean studies at Pennsylvania State University, thinks it reasonable to conclude that the demonym Israel, recorded on the Merneptah Stele, refers to a Shasu enclave, and that, since later biblical tradition portrays Yahweh as coming forth from Seir, the Shasu, originally from Moab and northern Edom, went on to form one major element in the amalgam that was to constitute the Israel, which later established the kingdom of Israel. Shasu were Semitic-speaking pastoral cattle nomads who appeared in the Levant, eastern Mediterranean littoral between Anatolia and Egypt, from the Late Bronze Age to the Early Iron Age or Third Intermediate Period of Egypt. They were organized in clans under a tribal chieftain, confer, aloof, and were described as brigands, bandits, active from the Jezreel Valley to Ashkelon and the Sinai. The name evolved from a transliteration of the Egyptian word shaswa, meaning those who move on foot, into the term for Bedouin-type wanderers. Contemporary Assyrian records refer to them as alamu, meaning wanderers. The biblical word, Ivri, Hebrew, means to traverse or pass over. The Edomites may have been connected with the Shasu and Shutu, nomadic raiders mentioned in Egyptian sources. A letter from an Egyptian scribe at a border fortress in the Wadi Tumilat during the reign of Merneptah reports movement of nomadic Shasu tribes of Edom to watering holes in Egyptian territory. The Edomites' original country, according to the Tanakh, stretched from the Sinai Peninsula as far as Kadesh Barnea. Southward it reached as far as Elat, which was the seaport of Edom. On the north of Edom was the territory of Moab. The boundary between Moab and Edom was the Wadi Zered. According to Genesis, Esau's descendants settled in this land after displacing the Horites. It was also called the land of Seir. Mount Seir appears to have been strongly identified with them, and may have been a cultic site. Whether they were among the nations referred to in the ancient Egyptian language as Shutu, or Shasu, is a matter of some debate among scholars. Despite a scarcity of archaeological evidence, the existence of Moab prior to the rise of the Israelite state has been deduced from a colossal statue erected at Luxor, by Pharaoh Ramses II, in the 13th century BCE, which lists Moab among a series of nations conquered during a campaign. Shutu, or Sutu, is the name given in ancient Akkadian language sources to certain nomadic groups of the Transjordanian highlands, extending deep into Mesopotamia and southern Iraq. The Moabites were likely settling in the Transjordanian highlands. In ancient Babylonian, Shutu also refers to south, or southern. Many scholars have speculated that Shutu may be a variant of the Egyptian phrase Shasu. According to Genesis, the Moabites were related to the Israelites, with both peoples tracing their descent back to a common ancestor, Terah, who is named as the father of Abraham and Haran being the father of Lot. The entire family, including grandchildren, lived in Ur of the Chaldees. Unlike the Akkadian-speaking Assyrians and Babylonians, the Chaldeans were certainly not a native Mesopotamian people, but were migrants to the region. They seem to have appeared there, circa 1000 BCE, not long after other new Semitic peoples, the Aramaeans and the Shutu, appeared in Babylonia, circa 1100 BCE. The Chaldeans originally spoke a West Semitic language, however they eventually adopted the Babylonian dialect of Akkadian, the same Semitic language, save for slight peculiarities in sound and in characters, as Assyrian Akkadian. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Abraham, as mentioned earlier, is stated to have originally been from Ur, of the Chaldees, Ur Kasdim. If this city is to be identified with the Sumerian Ur, it would be within the original Chaldean homeland, south of the Euphrates, although it must be pointed out that the Chaldeans certainly did not exist in Mesopotamia at the time of Abraham, which casts doubt on the historicity of the story. Both Islamic tradition and classical Jewish authorities, such as Maimonides and Josephus, placed Ur-Kasdim at various northern Mesopotamian sites, such as Urkesh, Urartu, Urfa, or Kutha. On the other hand, the traditional identification with a site in Assyria would then imply the later sense of Babylonia, and a few interpreters have additionally tried to identify Abraham's birthplace with Chaldea, a distinct region in Asia Minor on the Black Sea. Initially, the name Chaldea was consigned to the highland region around Gumuchane, in northeast Anatolia, but in the Middle Byzantine period, the name was extended to include the coastal areas, and thus the entire province around Trapezius, Trebizond, modern Trabzon. The first local inhabitants, the Chaldees, were counted among the earliest ironsmith nations by classical writers. The Greek name for steel is kalibas, possibly deriving from them. To be continued, in Chapter 1, Section C. Thank you for listening.